hold space for your darkness, a first responder mental health podcast hosted by me, Erin Jane, where we have conversations about what it's like to perform a first responder role and the mental health challenges that can accompany it. Hello and welcome to another episode of I Will Hold Space for Your Darkness, a First Responder Mental Health Podcast. I'm your host, Erin Jane, and today I am joined by a veteran and former law enforcement officer and peace support specialist named Steve Powers. Steve served in the US Marine Corps for 4 years, where he held positions in security forces and as a squad leader in the 3rd Battalion. He served as a correctional officer for 4 years with the Charles County Sheriff's Office in Maryland before transitioning to the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department, where he spent the next 22 years of his career. Since retiring in November 2021, Steve has spent his time heavily involved in peer support, crisis intervention teams focusing on vicarious trauma and officer wellness. In 2009, he also founded the organization #BuddyCheck, which is a 501c3, and its purpose is to assist first responders and spouses with the impact of trauma through awareness and education after experiencing some of his own share of trauma exposure and mental health challenges over his 30 plus years of service. So after that delicious mouthful, hello, Steve. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, Erin, how are you? It's good to finally be on.
I know, this is wonderful. Thank you for taking the time to come and join me today. So I guess we'll sort of just barrel into it and maybe take you all the way back to the beginning. What made you want to enlist and join the Marines?
I can't pinpoint the exact instant or whatever, but there was a couple things that happened to me as a child and as a toddler and a young adult that sort of led me into that helper profession. Mm-hmm. Obviously, for law enforcement and here in the United States, you have to be 21. College was never anything at the time that I was very interested in. So obviously the military seemed like the good route to go. Plus that would hopefully prepare me for that career in law enforcement that I looked at. So I joined the Marine Corps when I was 17 years old. My mom had to sign the papers because I wasn't old enough. So, obviously it was something I always wanted to do, but again, because I was underage, my mom made me go talk to all the branches before she would sign the paperwork. I saw this wonderful recruiting video for the Marine Corps. It was called Warriors of the Sea, and I was basically just hooked after that. All that good high-speed, low drag, cool stuff that you only got to do every once in a while.
It sounds like fun. So it sounds like you were kind of seeking something that gave you like that, I guess, like certain level of like discipline that you believed would then kind of like serve you really well going to like a law enforcement career.
And purpose, looking for that purpose, looking for those, that discipline, that skill. Again, I was still a very young adult at that point. So I definitely needed some maturing. I needed some growing up, and I thought the Marine Corps would be able to provide me that stable environment to learn and to grow.
And what was your experience like in it? From my research, I think we were stationed out, is it in Hawaii?
I was stationed in Hawaii, so kind of a hard station to really
that sounds very challenging for you.
And the funny thing was when I found out I was getting stationed out there, I was actually disappointed because I was supposed to be going to Virginia, which was near where my girlfriend, who eventually became my fiance and my wife, lived in Maryland. So I was like, I'm going to be close to home. So when I found out I was going to Hawaii, me and her both were kind of like, what the, damn, I can't believe we're going to, I got to go all the way out there. Little did I know, it's Hawaii. So really, are we really able to complain about going to Hawaii?
You shouldn't put it that way.
And I didn't. In the beginning, it was a little, like I said, a little like son of a gun. But then once I sort of thought it out and sort of looked at the larger picture, I realized there's worse places to go, like, Jacksonville, North Carolina, per se.
And you,
So went out there, did security forces for a number of years, which we did the security for the refueling and defueling of the nuclear subs. And we also did the security for where all the admirals and commanding generals lived and worked. And it's almost like a subsection of the
Okay.
NSA facility. It's called the St. Pac. It's where the whole Pacific Fleet is commanded from. So we did the security for that too while subs weren't
Wow,
in
that
port.
sounds pretty cool. Yeah.
Had
Yeah.
some good times.
And so did you spend 4 years out there?
About a little over 3 years by the time
yeah.
I went through all my schooling and
Okay.
all that stuff.
And
So,
was it when you signed up at that point, it was like the 4-year commitment?
Yes. Yeah, I signed up for the 4-year commitment. Sort of again with that long-term picture to where I would get out at age 22 and then I would be able to transfer into a law enforcement career.
And you
at
were
that point.
like happy, were you content to sort of walk away after your 4 years? You're like, I'm good.
Torn. I was torn. Obviously I made a lot of friendships, a lot of connections. A lot of them are still strong to this day. For those guys I served with, I'm sure you can relate to, some of the people you worked with. But it was sort of part of the plan. By that point, I was married. My wife was pregnant, so I little did I know that I thought policing was going to be a little bit easier on the family.
I know,
being around more,
to be young and naive and 22 when we think those things.
Yes. to not be deployed for a year at a time and stuff like that. So I just thought it was sort of the next step in the linear process.
No, and it makes sense. But Steve and I have sort of spoken offline a little bit, and now your love for Hawaii just makes so much sense to me. I mean, besides the fact it's Hawaii, like now knowing that you spent time out there, like no wonder you love it so much.
Yeah. It took me and my wife about 18 years, I think, to get back. So a lot had changed, and ever since then, we try to go about every year if we can. We're going to skip this year, but hopefully next year we'll be back out there.
Absolutely lovely. And what was I going to say? Just like on a side note, my husband went to a military college here on the East Coast, and hearing you like talk about those friendship and the bonds that you made and the ones that like you still keep to this day, like my husband's like core group of mates who I think we had their, how old is he? Like 25 or 30-year reunion like last year. And there is still that core and they went through that, those like 4 years of schooling together. And there's like about the discipline and everything that they went through. There's like a special bond that's created with like people who go through those things together.
Yeah, when you go through things that suck, or you go through things that are good, you build those bonds. And, it's funny, we can go years without seeing or talking to one another. The second we pick up the phone or the second we happen to get back together, it's like we're 19, 20,
I have vividly
years old
witnessed that.
Again.
Yes.
Yes. Our maturity level goes back down 100%. A little bit. Yes. We start acting like little boys and all that good stuff. But yeah, it's hard. I always tell anybody that if they're thinking about any kind of military service, I there's things about mine I would change. Obviously, I'm sure there's things about a lot of people's that would change, but I would not change not going in. I would still sign up today. I would still serve. I believe it teaches you lifelong lessons. I
wholeheartedly agree. And so given that you said that, or you mentioned that your wife was from Maryland, that kind of probably answers one of the questions of why you went and got a job as a correctional officer out that way.
Well, again, that's where I was from as well. We went to high school together. So we were sort of high school sweethearts, but more so when she's a year behind me. So during her senior year, we were sort of together and all that, but again, a long distance relationship. So when I got out, obviously I went sort of back home to what I knew and started applying to some local sheriff's office and police departments. And Charles County just happened to be the one that called me back first and provided me a job, which I needed with a job
understandable. And so as like a correctional officer, was that sort of, were you actually like with inmates? Were they like people who were like sort of pre-sentencing? Like what was the demographic like? Okay.
All of the above. It was a county facility, I would say, and this would
Yeah.
have been in the mid 90s, mid to late 90s. And we probably had maybe 500
Mhm.
inmates roughly. And towards the latter half of the time I was there, we had a contract with the federal government where we had 50 federal inmates that were sentenced to federal time, whether that's armed robbery or
So, like,
bank
the
robbery or
higher
rape or
end offenses,
murder.
yeah.
Correct. Correct. And, once there, I served doing different things. I would do the intake when they first came in. I would do the
Mhm.
housing blocks back in the back. I would do court security and court transfer to where we would take them
Yep.
from the facility to court every morning and back and forth. So
Mhm.
I did a little bit of everything in the time that I was there. So it sort of broke up that
Yep.
monotony of just doing one job. Um, but again, I learned a lot doing it, and I wouldn't necessarily trade that time. I'm glad not to
Yeah.
be locked up anymore. Sometimes you get that feeling that you're locked up just like they are because you're back there for 8, 10, 12 hours a day.
Yeah.
God forbid somebody calls in sick, you got to stay late, so yeah,
Yeah. You're not
it sucked
yeah.
too many times. But again, I formed friendships and bonds with a lot of people that,
Mhm.
again, still
Yeah,
to today I can
you're not the
talk to.
first person who I've interviewed who has, worked as a correctional officer, and that is exactly the same thing that he said. He's like, "You feel like you're doing time with them." Like, it's yeah.
Yes. Yeah, and and I have all the, having done it now, I have all the respect for the people that do it for, 5,
Mhm.
10, 15, 20, 25 years, because I don't think I would have been able to. I just don't think I would have been
Yeah.
able to do that for that long length of time. Again, you're locked up what they are. You can't, it's a different world back there.
Mhm.
Once those sort of gates shut and you're back there with the inmates or whatever the facility happens to call them nowadays, residents or whatever.
Sorry, you might have had my
Um,
audible eye roll.
yeah, it, people call it a zoo, and it can be zoo-like
Yeah, we
environment. That's for sure.
certain police stations I worked for back home when you were in uniform, if you had cells, part of like the duties that you would do, and it's yeah, it's a different, completely different environment, and it's interesting, the population that you're dealing
It
with,
is.
and then yeah, having to interact with them, like feed them, and all that, all those kind of like daily necessity things, because obviously they do deserve to be treated appropriately, but sometimes you were just like it was normally the smells for me. It was a bit like
Yes. Yeah.
oh god, I
Some
know,
interesting
right?
stories I could tell. Mhm. Where I'd have to go
Yeah, it
home and
would be
decontaminate
yeah,
myself.
vivid memories from those times, I bet.
Yes. Yeah.
And so then what was like after you sort of did like sort of 3 or 4 years in Maryland, what sort of precipitated you like transitioning to North Carolina?
At the time, I had an aunt that lived down here
Hmm.
in a small town just north of Charlotte in Huntersville. Always liked the area. This would have been back in the late 90s. The area of Charlotte hadn't been built
Hmm.
up as much as it is now. I had applied for a couple other police departments. I was just tired of being locked up sort of
Yep.
for my 8, 10, 12-hour shifts. And, I wanted to get out on the street in the county that I worked, Charles County at the time. Somebody predominantly had to almost pass away or
Oh,
retire for a slot to open up because it was a smaller county. And it was sort of a good old boy network or whatever. So I knew my time, it was going to take a little while, and
yeah.
I
A
just didn't
little bit
have
of
the
like
patience to
nepotism
wait.
at play sort of thing, like who
So,
you knew. And,
yeah, it's just south of DC, Washington DC, and we just had a baby, and so we thought might be good to sort of get out of Dodge and move south where it might be a
Yep,
better
that
place to
makes
raise a family.
sense. And and so Charlotte, like, did you like apply for a few, and then Charlotte-Mecklenburg was kind of just the one that you got a position with?
Yeah, I applied for a couple in Virginia and two in North Carolina, and
Okay.
Charlotte just happened to call first. And having that aunt that lived in the area was helpful. To We had gone down and visited a couple times, so I was vaguely familiar with the area, and I sort of um,
Hmm.
liked the area at the time and thought it'd be a good again, to
Yep.
sort of lay down some
And
roots and,
22
have the
years
fun.
worth of service there, you definitely laid down some roots.
I did, and I'm glad now that I
Yes,
uprooted them and moved to the beach.
understandable. And so talk to me about, 22 years of service. I'm sure that you did a lot and experienced a lot in that time. What like sort of departments, did you spend time working in?
Sure, I did. My time there, I did a lot of various roles. I served as a community coordinator. I served on patrol. I served on what we called the focus mission team, where if
Yep.
we had a certain crime trend, we would target specific individuals that we
Yep.
suspected of committing some of these crimes. The last handful of my years there, I did in what we call the
Mm-hmm.
community policing crisis response team, and what that was every crisis call that came across in the entire county, we would get dispatched to, whether that was a active suicide, whether that was a completed suicide, whether that was a mental health call, whether that was an infant death call, whether that was a death of a family member, whether that was a homeless or a substance use issue or any crisis call, basically any call that regular patrol would be like,
So basically all the
I don't
heavy
really know
shit.
what to do. Yes, yes. So it was what we call a co-responder model. So my
Oh,
partner was
okay,
a
cool. Yeah,
licensed
I've
clinical
heard
social
a few
worker.
of
So
those, yeah,
if he was a
teams like
clinician,
filtering
yep.
through different departments.
So we would go to that call. My job would be to
Mm-hmm.
predominantly make sure the scene was safe and that it was okay, and then the clinician would come in and do her thing, and then um, that's where I mean, every day I was, like you said, heavy, heavy, heavy shit every day.
Yeah.
And that definitely took its toll on me in a negative light. But I can look back on those years and also say that I felt like I might have made the biggest difference, because there was, I'm sure you would go on those same domestic calls to the same address every night or every 3 nights, and it was the same bullshit
Mm-hmm.
every night, every time we would go. A lot of these calls, you would only see those people once or twice. And then if you could connect them to services, or if you could connect them to some respite or to family or something like that, then it was a lot easier to have them to
Yeah.
not be those repeat calls for service. And um, we got obviously specialized training and all that good stuff, so we could diffuse that situation. So a lot of times, a lot of these mental health calls ends in officer involved shootings and stuff like that. So the department did a lot of prepping us and
Mm-hmm.
sending us to various schools and courses, and exposing us to that, so that they could reduce those, not only those shootings and uses of force, but
Yeah.
injuries and
And
lawsuits as well.
and it also sort of sounds like you really heavily got involved in, and I don't know whether it was because of that role or you had like an interest along the way of that, peer support, and also like veteran suicide prevention and all that kind of thing. Like, where did that sort of join as a part of your service?
It was something.
Mm-hmm.
It goes back to probably the Marine Corps. You serve those bonds, and you
Yeah.
serve and you get those bonds with people, and you legitimately care what they're going through, and you want them, one, just out of empathy, you want them to be
Yeah.
wholehearted and coming to work ready to do their job. But then also, if they're not, that could affect me, that could affect the other squad mates and all that good stuff. So it was something that was always there. Obviously, the veteran population, I'm extremely passionate
Mm-hmm.
about, having been a veteran myself. Um, and I sort of just found myself thrusted into that sort of position before I really realized
Yeah.
it was sort of being organized. People would call me after a bad call and vent to me, and
You were
I
that
don't know if
person. Yeah.
I just give off that get off that personality. Hey, let's laugh about this, because it's a hell of a
Yeah.
lot better than crying about it. I've had my mental health struggles throughout the years, and I was always pretty open about it. So people knew
Mm-hmm.
and felt that they could probably trust me. I wasn't for, the first half of my career, I wasn't actually on the peer support, but my phone would ring
Yeah.
probably almost as much as theirs. Um, So then once I realized that, I was like, I need to actually get on peer support. So we had our own school that we put on as a department that I went to. And then I also went down to
Like,
FLETC and took
mhm.
the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center, where all the federal law enforcement goes. I went down there and took their peer support
Yeah.
training as well. So, um, I think it just stems back to that, stems back to the military, stems back to, basically giving a shit about the guy sitting next to you in the foxhole, so to speak. And, having, again, having struggled myself, I can definitely relate and have that empathy to be able
Yeah,
to sort of
no,
walk
that
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 journey
makes
with them.
total sense, and it's sort of, uh, it's not necessarily a focus of many police departments. So it sounds very encouraging that it was like, yeah, go do this course or go do that course or establish, that kind of thing to in order to help yourself and help your fellow troops.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think more
Mm-hmm.
departments are getting better at it. Nowadays it's definitely coming more to the
Yep.
forefront than it once was. Obviously, there's tons of departments that have it locked down and they're doing
Yeah.
wonderful, and there's departments that are definitely lacking. But I think all of them, at
Yeah.
least, hopefully, it's at least on their radar. And if it's not a organized thing through the department, maybe I used to call it the
I
underground mental
kind of
health
like that.
network.
Yeah.
If it's not organized, hopefully there's this underground movement where there's a handful of
Mm-hmm.
people that have seen or done some things that the other officers or deputies or correctional
Yeah.
officers or firefighters can reach out to and
Yeah.
sort of bounce
No,
those things
and that
off them.
that that definitely makes sense. And sort of, I guess, what you're saying, it kind of sounds like it's like you're saying, the empathy and the compassion and the care for, you know, the guy or girl, like working beside you, or like, use the analogy in the foxhole. Was it like a mixture of that and then some of your own sort of personal struggles that really created that passion and that drive in you? Because a lot of people, especially going to work and doing everything that you do, you, your bucket might get full and you kind of go, I don't have a capacity for that. And it
Yes.
sounds like you had so much capacity.
Well, in an unhealthy way, my bucket was full, but I kept doing it anyway because we all know it's sometimes easier to focus on
Yeah.
somebody else and help them with their journey
Yeah.
than
Yeah.
to take that serious look at yourself and your own struggles.
I am.
You know,
Look at
it's,
the
it's a
shiny
wonderful
thing over
trauma
here.
response to just stay busy. Yeah, to stay busy so you don't have to focus on your own shit, focus on somebody else's. You can help them. It's a lot easier to give advice than to
I
hear
know.
it and to follow it up yourself. But yeah, it was definitely a mix of
Yeah.
my own experience plus
Mm-hmm.
just
Yeah.
that empathy care. Somebody the I've attempted to in my life twice. After the first one, there was a good friend that I served in the Marine Corps with that was a police officer out in Washington State, and he was there for me. So I think it really took it definitely
Mm-hmm.
got stronger for me at that point. I
Yeah.
felt like I sort of had to pay it forward
Yeah.
because he was there for me. So
If you're comfortable, talking about it, Steve, like, where were you at in your career and family life to, find yourself in that place of such strong suicidal ideation?
just a very, I know it sounds common, but just a very, very dark place. I couldn't see any joy. I had three children. I had a beautiful wife that loved me, and nothing to me brought me joy. And it was definitely because I would just kind of keep piling the trauma on and dealing with it in unhealthy ways. Um, Definitely um, got me to that point where I just thought, again, everybody says it, I was just tired of the pain. I was tired of the darkness. I saw no way out. I saw no light at the end of the tunnel. Um, and I couldn't have been more wrong. Again, my bucket was already
Yeah.
full with my loved ones and my family and all that, but I just couldn't see it. I just couldn't, open my eyes. I always sort of tell people it was almost like trying to look through a cloudy glass of some kind of beverage instead of like seeing under the water clear. Just was not clear. Everything was clouded. Everything was dark. And then just those calls for service that made it worse. Being a parent, not that all calls don't bother me, but especially ones with children, seem to hurt the worst. And I'm sure most people feel that way, even maybe non-parents. But and not dealing with those calls, for years, my wife would urge me to go to therapy and urge me to talk to people, and I couldn't gaslight her or dismiss her quick enough. And I probably wouldn't be where I am today if I didn't sort of take that journey. So I'm happy where I am today, but that journey, I sort of wish I could have taken a different route, but
that
still
sort
got
of
to where I am.
Post-traumatic growth, like
cycle. Yes. That post-traumatic growth is amazing. And, obviously I'm here to say it works. It's there. You can do it. But to have that post-traumatic stress injury or disorder, depending on what line you come from, sucks. That part sucks, but the growth from it is amazing. You can not only live, but you can thrive post-traumatic.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. I know that can't be a happy time of your life. That is, thrilling to speak about.
No, but again, it's a journey, and it's all, life is about that journey. It's not always about the destination. It's about the journey. And, I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about my wife. She was 100% committed. She was the rock that many times, that I was trying to, break, and she just was solid, and I couldn't thank her enough.
And so you said that you had a really good friend from the Marine Corps who was also in law enforcement, who sort of helped you after that point. So I think we've had a lot of guests on here who have had that suicidal ideation, and many have made attempts similar to yours. Or, maybe even people who've thought about it and have found themselves in similar situations. Talk to me about that aftermath and what helped you through it. Obviously, your wife and your family.
Yeah, my wife, my family, my buddy, and after the first attempt, I did just enough work to get to where I thought I was sort of healthy. I didn't really get to the good, deep down, therapeutic work to fix some things. I did just enough on the surface to make me think I was better, which unfortunately led to the second attempt. So it truly wasn't until after the second attempt that, again, I was just tired of living in that darkness. I was just tired, exhausted, physically, mentally, emotionally. And I basically told myself, if I don't change my life, if I don't find some way to, and I don't want to say I was broken, but some way to sort of fix what was not right, I was going to do it. It was just a matter of time before I would actually complete it. And having done the job for so long and seeing that damage that does, I just didn't want to push that onto my children. I didn't want to do that to my wife. Obviously, I want to see my kids have babies and be a grandfather, which I am now. So all that stuff I wanted to. So that was sort of that motivation. And then some hard loving from my friend from the Marine Corps. He's typical Marine Corps fashion. He didn't baby me. He didn't, he didn't weigh it with an ounce of sugar when he would propose things to me. He got into my ass, which is exactly what I
gave you the
needed.
kick up the ass that you needed.
Yes, many kicks up the ass.
And you don't obviously have to give an exact date or timeline or anything like that. But are you comfortable sharing sort of a relative time period of when that occurred?
Yeah, the second time would have happened in around 19 or 20. 2019, 2020 timeframe towards the end of my career. You look back and you see the passive ideation. I don't want to say attempts, but I
Yeah.
stopped wearing
No
my bulletproof vest at
seatbelt, all that
work.
kind of thing.
I stopped. I stopped wearing my seatbelt. I would cancel my backup on dangerous calls. All those
Mm-hmm.
classic telltale signs that at the time I wasn't really putting
Yeah.
together into that big picture. Um, so I would definitely say the no vest, no seatbelt, canceling backup probably would have started
Yeah.
around 2016, 2017. I did not, I still had that appearance of I didn't want to be weak. I didn't want that stigma. So again, if I was to happen to pass away on the job, I'd get that hero's funeral. My family would get the benefits,
Yeah.
but the pain that I was in would stop. Um, so I was, now I can look back, I was hoping that it would happen. That way I didn't have to face the hard facts of actually taking my own
Yeah.
life and actually completing it. But again,
Mm-hmm.
I love where I'm at now. Um, I'm still in therapy to this day. I believe everybody needs to be in therapy, whether it's once a week, once a month, or at least once a year. But I
Yeah.
believe everybody can go in for a quick tune up, kind of an oil change or something. Um, and therapy may not be for everybody,
Mm-hmm.
but it's definitely assisted me along with some medication, which I
Yeah.
believe is just another leg of that
Yeah.
stool.
Oh,
So
I
I can
like that
sit on
analogy. I haven't heard that one before.
it. Think of
Oh,
it, a three-legged stool: medication,
yeah.
therapy, and your
I
support
really,
system. If you break a leg, are you going to be able to
yeah.
sit?
Yeah.
It's going to come crashing in.
Yeah,
Some people need those three
definitely.
legs.
Wow. No, I really, that resonates so strongly. And I think as well, because number one, passive suicidality, I don't think it's spoken about a lot, and it's actually super common.
No, it is very common. And the funny thing was, I would notice it
Mm-hmm.
in other people, and I knew because they had came to me and vented that
Yeah.
they were going through some things as well. And I never, at the time, I never really connected the dots that maybe they just for whatever reason they just can't
Yeah.
complete it. They just can't take their life, but they are perfectly okay if they were to get shot by a bad guy on a traffic stop and pass away. So it's
Yeah.
definitely, I think, not talked
Yeah.
enough about. So I would say to people, if you know people on the job, or I don't know much about the fire service, but if you're not wearing your turnout coat and you go into a
Mm,
house fire, that's probably not going to end well. You know, or if you don't have your air mask on, or your oxygen tank ain't filled, or something like that. So if you're working and you happen to see people doing these things, that's where that buddy check would come into
yeah.
play, and you just simply ask the question, how are you doing, and
Actually
actually
listen.
care,
Yeah.
because a lot of people will ask that question,
Mm-mm.
but they don't really give a shit. It's one of those passing, like, I got your back. Do you really? Because if you ask the question and I tell you the truth, I'm going to need you to listen to me. I don't necessarily need you to fix it. I don't necessarily need you to fix me or point me in the general direction. But if you ask and I'm vulnerable enough to answer that question honestly,
Oh,
and you shut me down,
I was going to say that the
I'm not going to open
damage
up to
that can be
anybody. And then
done, like it's
yes,
legitimately can be catastrophic, like you're saying. And especially like,
yes,
spoken to obviously lots of people on here, and then just, out and about doing the things that we do. And it's like when someone finally reaches that point where like, yes, like I need help, I can acknowledge it. And they go and, have a really awful like interaction with a therapist who's just not like the right fit, and they've it's like taken every ounce of their strength and their willpower and their vulnerability to like walk through that door, and then it can shut someone down for like another decade. It's
yeah, and it does, because I've been to therapists where I go in and I start talking, years ago, and they would start to cry. And I'm like, wait a minute. I thought I was the one that was supposed to come here and sort of vent this stuff and talk, not you. I've had therapists, tell me to leave my gun in the car. I've had therapists that were uncomfortable with me being in
yeah,
uniform because I may go straight from work,
yeah,
you know, just throw a shirt over top of my uniform or something like that while I drive. So, and that's
yeah.
exactly what happened. It would turn me off. I would stop. I would stop going. I would start to
Mm-hmm.
fall what I call below my baseline, my wife would notice, and I would gaslight her for a while, and then finally my buddy would be like, "Get off your ass." I spoke to your wife. She said you're not doing too good. Get another goddamn
Yep.
therapist and go talk
And
about
as
this.
a spouse, we always fucking know.
So it does.
Like, we know.
You all know before. I don't know if you know before we know, but you definitely will admit it before
that's
we
definitely
admit it.
true. Like,
Yeah.
but
Because again, who sees the change in us first? Those who are in our lives every day, those who we come home to after a hard shift, those who we, and I would come home after seeing God only knows what. And my wife would ask me how work was. And at the time, I was of the mindset I didn't want to sort of traumatize her. So I would just be like, it was a boring shift. Nothing happened. And I could have been involved in almost a shooting. I could have saw infant death or completed suicide. I could have saw somebody jump from, a bridge or any of those things. And I would just tell my wife, it was boring. No good calls, because I didn't want to transfer that trauma onto her. And little did I know she would go to one extreme, either, okay, it was that boring, or holy crap, what happened? He almost lost his life to that type of deal. And she would fill in those blanks or whatever with her own mind movies. So it took me many years to get to the point where I would finally be okay with sharing. And my wife came up with the movie rating system. I would come home and she'd be like, we called it the daily download. She's like, okay, go upstairs, get changed, take a quick shower, whatever. When you come downstairs, we'll do our daily download. Let's find out how your day was. We'll tell about my day. And then I would always ask her, do you want the rated R version? Do you want the PG-13 version? Or do you want the G version? Which version do you? And when she would say the R, I'd be like, are you sure? Because this should have been like an X-rated or whatever. And she was like, yeah. So I'm like, okay. And then that, but it would help me process it too. It's a proven fact. If you can process some of that trauma within that first 24
100%.
hours, it doesn't.
That's the whole point of like the CISM team strategy. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So I always tell people, I don't care how you process it. I don't care who you talk to. I don't care if you talk to yourself as you drive home from work, but actually legitimately you may look crazy in the car driving home or something, but who cares? Have that actual conversation with yourself so you can get it out, whether it's journaling, whether it's going home to your spouse, whether it's calling a buddy while you're driving home or something like that, something. Yeah. So you're not storing it, because again, you said the bucket's going to flow in this job, in these helper professions. Your bucket's going to overflow. It's not if. It's not if, it's when. It's going to happen. And it's just how are we adapt to get that post-traumatic growth? How adapt are we to sort of bounce back in a shorter length of time than a longer length of time? Just like physical injuries, doing these jobs, you're going to get hurt. You're going to twist a knee, pull a shoulder, get in a physical altercation, get burnt, fall through stairs, whatever for firefighters. But you're going to get hurt physically, but you're also going to get hurt emotionally and psychologically. And we don't talk about that a whole lot.
We don't sort of give it the respect that a physical injury sort of garners. Like, oh yeah, that person broke their hand or hurt this or hurt that in the middle of like a foot pursuit or this or that. And it's like, sometimes the psychological injury can be sustained for so much longer, and yet it's kind of just so easily dismissed. You make me laugh though. So my husband and I similarly have a sort of like code system for when he gets home from work, but maybe it's because I was a first responder that ours is a lot dirtier than your one is. It's
sure.
like,
I'm sure that's part of it.
My hubby, not much of a talker, and that's him. And even given what I do and the nature of, my empathy and compassion, all that kind of thing. And he knows it's there if he wants it and needs it, but he's not much of a talker. But like, he'll come home and I can kind of, clock little bits and pieces going on with him. And it's going to sound inappropriate, but that's okay. I don't mind sharing it. that we kind of base ours on like a rape scale, like how badly were you bent over last night? Was it just a gentle reach around? Did you really? Yeah, like so we sort of
Yes.
like
Yeah.
with our
And
scale.
I used to use sort of those scales with like my buddies, but with my wife, and it got to the point where
Yeah.
she wanted the rated R version every time,
Mm-hmm.
and it was fine. Um, but you also have to, obviously you're married to your husband. You've been married to him for years. You have that instant empathy. You have that connection. You have that relationship where it's strong enough to. So once that trust and that acceptance of that vulnerability gets there, whether that's with a loved one or a friend or whatever, it's a lot easier to share the rated R versions or the fully bent over um, prison sex rate
I
scale
know.
that you all
It's
use.
like sometimes he'll say stuff to me and I'm like, when people ask me like what it's like being married to you and how romantic you are, I'm like, I'm going to share this with them. But oh my goodness, he
I'm
does. He's
sure
a
he
sicko.
loves that.
But it's like whatever works, and that is, and I, well, and I think it's important because
Exactly.
it's like both of us are sharing, and this is just our unique dynamics, and what works for you guys works for you, and what works for us works for us. And it's whether it's injecting humor, whether it's injecting that compassion and empathy, like whatever it is that person needs. I think that's really the most important part about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, the most important part is just getting it
Yeah.
out and sharing it. Doesn't matter what scale you use. It doesn't matter, you know. Obviously, first responders are huge
Yeah.
with deflecting the shit with humor, but again, we're sort of venting it a little bit when we do that, and that's how we sort of test the waters with other people to see. Okay, I'm trying to be vulnerable
Yeah.
a little bit. Let's see what it feels like, and then you can give them the full
Massively.
blown out version at
Exactly.
that
I
point.
know. Oh dear. We are sickos, aren't we?
Yeah, it's all good. Look,
I
think
know,
about what
right?
we all do for a living.
Um
You know, you have to be a little off in
this
order
is
to do
true.
that career for any length
Um
of time.
and I sort of we've just been having a very light interaction, so I don't want to like steer it off the cliff too hard, but can I ask, and if you're not comfortable answering, that's totally fine. What was it like for you if you were in a role like that to have to go and attend either an attempt or a completed suicide scene after you had made your own attempts?
I, I was very adept to being able
Okay.
to almost close my folder
Yeah.
and open the folder of another person. Um, but it was definitely very triggering, and it definitely was a stressor because um, I found myself, I can connect with people very easily. I find whatever hook, whether that's military service, whether that's
Mm-hmm.
whatever sports fans,
Yeah.
whatever that you find that hook. And if that hook happens to be mental health and suicidal ideation, then that's the hook I would use. And I'd be like, look,
Yeah.
I'm right there with you. All joking aside, I am right there with you. And let me tell you, this is not going to work. This is not going to fix
Yeah.
anything. Just talk to me. That's all I'm asking. Give me a chance. I will walk this journey with you as long as I can. Um, and again, what I said earlier about I actually felt like there was some actual success
Yeah.
once I started doing that role.
Build that really
Um,
sincere
you know,
rapport with people. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and I mean, it's like anything else. If you're not able to communicate with somebody or have that empathy with somebody, then
Yeah.
you probably shouldn't even show up. Because you're probably going to do more harm than good. Which there was plenty of times where I would have to take over for somebody who
Yeah.
just couldn't find that hook and just couldn't
Yeah.
get them talking. Um,
Oh,
veterans,
massively. Yeah.
instant rapport. We both been through the same bullshit, so we can
Mm-hmm.
instantly connect through that. And that's when you got to look at the total picture, their physical out. If they're wearing a T-shirt for a sports
Yeah.
team or something, anything you can find to, you know, it's kind of like a foot
Yeah.
in the door sales technique.
Yeah.
When you go to buy a car or something like that, if you can just find that hook to keep them at the table, eventually it
Yeah.
more
And
times
I
than not
think
will
as
probably
well,
work
like,
out.
I don't know if like you sort of felt it, but I know I sort of did. Like, they can smell bullshit. Like when someone is in that vulnerable state, and yeah, whether they've like just attempted to take their life, and or you're like, they're just in, yeah, that very, very, very vulnerable place. Like when someone, what am I trying to say? When they see past your uniform and they see you as a human
Yes.
who does have their own struggles and whatever else. And I still remember, like, I was a very baby police officer, like baby trainee. And we got called to a house of a bloke who just had attempted and was unsuccessful. And he'd smashed like the scone of his head. He tried to hang himself, and he'd like landed like on his head, and somehow managed to call us. And we get there, and like my senior member, he goes, "Oh, I left a suicide note on the computer." And so she darts off to go read it, and I'm like 22 years old. I'm like, Jesus fucking Christ. Yeah. And
What
I'm
do I
like,
do now?
and
Yeah.
I was kind of like I think I had like a tea towel on his head. I'm like, I think I can see brain. I'm like, holy fucking shit. I'm like, I don't know what to say to this guy as a police officer right now. I'm like, but you know what? I know what to say to him as the daughter of someone who completed suicide. And that's what I did.
Yep. And that and I guarantee you
Mm-hmm.
there was an instant connection between the two of you, because just like we have a fairly decent bullshit meter where we can pick up on it. I don't want to say that. How can we refer to the individuals that call 911?
Yeah.
A lot of them have it as well, and like you were saying, they can see through the bullshit. So I always would recommend and tell people, don't, if they say they're in the military, don't say you're in the military if
Oh,
you weren't,
yeah,
because
nah.
they're going to be able to call you out on it.
Oh,
And then
massively,
that
yeah.
door slams shut, and you may not be able to reopen it, and it's going to take somebody else a lot of work to get that door back open, that wall lifted, and try to start that conversation. And I've sat on the edges of buildings with
Yeah.
safety ropes with people, and it's just what you have to do.
Yeah.
Because again, they're hurting. The bottom line is they're hurting, and most of them are just looking for
Massively.
somebody that gives a shit. To at least listen to them bitch and gripe and complain about what we may think is pretty trivial, but to
Exactly.
them it's their
I
entire
remember.
life. Um, so yeah, I think if you're able to have that empathy and compassion, for even if they're shithead suspects or whatever, again, they might have made some poor
Mm-hmm.
decisions, they may have made some poor choices, whatever. But if you can separate and have that empathy, which
Oh,
is the
one of
strongest
my
word in the
favorites.
English language, is empathy. If you can have empathy,
Mm-hmm.
you can accomplish a whole lot. And again, the number one, I just want to go home at the end of the night safe. I just wanted
Yeah.
them to get the help they needed. I wanted to keep other people safe, whether that's coworkers or other civilians or whatever. So if you have to put the fact that they're a rapist aside for 20 minutes while you have that conversation, you
Yeah.
know, and it's hard. It can be very difficult, especially if you have a history with this person, if they're, serial abuser or whatever, to be able to put that aside and try to have a legitimate empathetic
Yeah.
conversation with them.
No,
It can be
definitely.
difficult.
And I think like you said, like I mean, I think there's for most first responders, and I know sort of for me, there needs to be a healthy level of dissociation, like, because otherwise I don't think you can be good at your job. Otherwise you're just going to take everything on and you're going to drown under the weight of it.
Mhm.
Um,
And you're going to think it's all your responsibility. It's my responsibility to fix this. It's my
can't help
responsibility to help
everyone.
this person. And
Ugh.
boundaries have to be there. And I'm not going to lie to you, I still struggle with boundaries to this day. And it's something that I work with in therapy, trying to
Mm-hmm.
remember where my boundaries are supposed to be, and not to take on the
Yeah.
responsibility if it's truly not mine. And I think all first responders sort of have that, that, I don't know what you want to call it, that need to be in control of the situation, to take care of, to circle all the wagons and to figure out what's going on. And then they assume, okay, it's now my responsibility to fix it because you called me
I
here
always
or
kind of, well,
whatever.
my
But
husband always says he's a little more hardened than I am in many respects. And he's like, you're such a bleeding heart, Erin. He's like, not your responsibility. I'm like, oh, but, and he's like, yeah.
But
Exactly.
the
I'm like,
biggest
oh,
word, but.
And he's and and I've had to like, even since like leaving the job, like you have to learn that you can't be everything to everyone, even if, in your heart of hearts, you really want to be, because you do, that empathy does make you feel like that person's pain and equally like, their triumph that you want to like help them get to, but you got to be able to, look after yourself and and just remember that's like, something like my hubby says, firefighter, and often, they get on the job and he's like, yeah, I can't wait to get a giant fire and this and that. And Eric and my husband, he's just like, fuck no. He's like, I'm so happy if there's no fires. He's just like, I want to, like, I've got my boys, I've got, my wife. He's like, I just want to fucking go home at the end of the day. He's like,
He just wants to sit in the lazy boy at the firehouse, eat chili, play with the dog,
or
wash
just
the
like
fire truck.
direct the others to wash the fire truck.
Yeah, I forgot. He's of rank. He can do that now.
Oh my goodness. But what was I going to say? Oh, and so I wanted to ask, and you sort of mentioned earlier on that you had, been somewhat open talking about some of like your struggles along your career. What education was there? Like you said that, you signed up to the military when you were 17, and then obviously you spent 4 years there, 4 years in corrections before you joined the police department in North Carolina. Like, what was the mental health education conversation, anything like that, sort of through your time?
I would say in the military it wasn't spoken about. There was nothing, suck it up, don't be weak type of attitude. In corrections, when I went through the academy for all that stuff, nothing, that guy's just, we used the 10 code, 1073. He's crazy. Crazy people are crazy people. And in the beginning of my policing career in North Carolina, it was more so the same. It wasn't really spoken about. We didn't really get any kind of training or classes or awareness training or anything like that until probably halfway through. And then the state mandated that there were some changes. So we started having to take like mental health first aid and QPR, stuff like that. So again, I think generationally we're making that sort of turn to being more open to it, to being more adapt to learning about it. And then I, I'm just a sponge for like psychology knowledge and why the brain does what it does. And so I used to love riding with my partner because
Oh my
again, they were
goodness,
a clinical
yes.
social worker, clinician. So after a call for service, I would be like, let me see your DSM-5. And I'd get the DSM-5 out and I'd flip through it. I'm like, I think that person had, dissociative, behavior disorder or whatever. So I would soak up the knowledge of them as well. And then I would just, on my own, I would just find any kind of training, any kind of conferences, any kind of classes that I could sign up to sort of just figure out why we do what we do and how we do it and why we do it. And so I think as an institution or an agency, just like most agencies, there's only so much money in the budget. There's only so much that you can dump on them at this point. But we could definitely do a better job. Even if it's, hey, if you're remotely interested in there, we've contacted the community college and they're willing to do a class or something, something like that, to where it's an elective. You're going to have to do it on your own time, but they've decided to waive the fee, so you can just go take it for free type deal or something like that. So those are just the things that I would just dive into myself, just to try to learn as much as I could, not only so I could do the job better, but also so I could figure out maybe how to, again, I'm not broken, how to fix myself a little bit and how to,
I'd say like heal.
remain above
Heal
my
is a nice
baseline.
word.
Yeah, I like that.
And so I think that sort of brings us to, which is the lovely shirt that Steve is wearing, hashtag BuddyCheck. And talk to me
Yes.
about where the impetus for that came from. What, like, just tell me everything.
Sure. So in like 2019, me and my wife started hashtag BuddyCheck, and what that is a nonprofit 501c3 where I go around and I do proactive education and awareness training on officer self care, vicarious trauma, military, veterans and active duty mental health training. And how that sort of started was, again, there wasn't that much out there,
Mm-hmm.
at least at the time, that I could find
Yep.
for myself to go learn. And I was already behind the ball because I'd already attempted to take my life twice. I was already
Mm-hmm.
sort of dealing with my own mental health stuff, and I sort of thought they didn't talk about any of this,
Yeah.
in the academy. They didn't tell me, that I was going to be having nightmares and smacking my dog when I sleep and crying and
Yep.
all that post traumatic stress stuff. So again, that's when I started just trying to learn everything. And like a good Marine, I sort of stole the philosophy from the Army, where in the Army they call them battle buddies. So you always had a battle
Interesting.
buddy. So you would be
For each other,
you and your
yeah.
battle buddy would be responsible for each other. So when we would go on vacation, and I have 3 children, I'd be like, "You're not going anywhere without your battle buddy. Find your battle buddy, whether that's your sister, your brother, or
Mm-hmm.
something. You're never going anywhere by yourself." Um, so it sort of morphed from that to the scuba diving, where they call it a buddy
Yep.
check. When you go in scuba diving, the person spins around and you check all their tanks and you check everything, and then you spin around and they check
Mm-hmm.
yours. Same thing with parachuting.
Yep.
So you have that buddy system to make sure that you both are good to go. So it's sort
Mm-hmm.
of a combination of those two things. So I started on social media. I would hashtag buddy check and stuff like that, and post, motivating stuff and mental health stuff. And I started to see some larger organizations all of a sudden starting to use hashtag buddy check. So I'm like, oh, I need to hurry up. So I trademarked the term
You're like,
hashtag
it's
buddy
mine,
check
god damn it.
and started, yeah, because the whole plan wasn't really to do it until I retired. Obviously being a full time
Yeah.
police officer, you don't have a whole lot of time to, take all this other stuff on. So I was like,
Mm-hmm.
we're just going to keep that on the back burner until it's time to sort of put it in motion. But it sort of fast forwarded between that, and that's when all the riots and the Black Lives Matter movement started. And it was obviously a very
Yep. And
stressful
then
time
COVID
for
hit
first responders
and
as a whole, especially police officers, COVID and all that. So I was getting,
yeah.
I'm not a hotline, but I found myself receiving phone calls from people who got my number from somebody else, or
Mm-hmm.
somebody I was in a class with or something, and they're struggling, drinking too much, they'll not being a faithful spouse, and internet retail therapy and doing buying shit that they don't need, and just all the maladaptive coping mechanisms. And so I found myself sort of in that role of sort of a hotline slash peer
Mm-hmm.
support specialist, trying to help them through that point. So we just decided to start it a little early. So, I go around, I
Mm-hmm.
speak at various conferences now, and I'm still involved in the CIT program locally and a couple of surrounding counties. I teach officer wellness there as well.
Yeah.
So that's
No,
sort of
I
basically all it
love it.
is.
It's great.
And it's,
Yeah.
it's a simple term, empathy. If I know, and the baseline is another thing I use a lot. If I know Erin's baseline is she's always joking and smiling and happy and all that, and you start coming to work and you're not that,
Yeah.
I need to ask that question. What's going on? What's wrong? But again, you're going to want it. You need to know that if they give you the truth, that you have to be there to be able to
Yeah.
at least walk with them. You don't have to fix it. You don't have to have a master's degree in counseling. You don't have to be a therapist. You don't have to have a college degree. All you got to do is again have a
Yeah.
little bit of empathy and a
No,
little bit of concern for the next person, and say, "I don't know. I don't know. I don't even know what to
yeah.
say." But you know
I'm here
what?
with you.
You're not alone. Let's go talk to somebody else. I know this person, or let's call this number. I've Googled, I've got 5 numbers. Which one do you want to call first? And I'll see if
No, and
I can
that's
make those
sort
phone
of part
calls.
of my coaching philosophy is, and it's what I finish each podcast episode with. It's let me listen in a way you've never been heard. Because
I do like
and like you're saying, it's like, oh, hey mate, how's it going? And every first responder, all the ones that I always used to know, and I'd be like, living the dream. And that could mean,
Yep.
I'm awesome and I slept great and I'm ready for my shift, or like my fucking relationship's in shambles and I'm still drunk from last night, but hey, I'm fucking here and living the dream. Like it's
Yep. And that's the thing that I even found myself early in my career being in those positions where I knew people were going through some marital issues. I knew people were showing up to work drunk. I knew people were, whoring around on their wives. I knew people were doing this and that, and I didn't say anything. Now at the time I was a newer officer. I didn't know, should I say anything? Should I be like, they're going to be like, shut up, rookie, mind your own business, you know. But I knew, and we even had an officer that I knew he would show up drunk probably 4 times a month, still from the night before, and he ended up killing somebody on the job. So again, as a first responder and as sort of who I am, I started taking on that responsibility. Like, son of a bitch, I could have said something and could have saved that life. So it's hard, but
No.
it's not hard to ask the question. How are you doing? How are you? Simple. How are you? And be prepared. Again, I've said it like broken. Just be prepared for the answer, because people want to ask those questions.
Yeah,
but they
well,
don't
because I
always
think
want
as
the
well,
answer.
there's like that sense of responsibility if someone does share it with you. But like I talk about with my coaching, it's like I think that there is great power in just, and name of the podcast, like holding space for someone and just feeling listened to and being given that space, and whether it's to rant or vent or you're after advice or whatever it is. But I actually think that a lot of the time we have the answers to all of the questions or all of our problems inside of us, but you either don't have anyone listening to you adequately, or you don't have someone asking the right questions. And
I agree, and I think if more people were less afraid to ask that question, because again, people don't always want that answer, or they're scared. How are you doing, Erin? And Erin says, I'm not doing good. My husband left me. My dog is dead. My
I
truck
was like,
broke
where
down
is
like
this
a
going?
country song. You know, whatever else. And then
Oh,
the
fuck.
person's like,
Yeah.
oh, well, I,
Yeah.
I was just on my way to go
Totally.
get lunch. So
Yeah.
sorry to hear that. So you got to make sure, if and I've always told people, it's like the old military adage: you praise in public and you criticize in private. So if you think something's going on, hey, let's go get a couple beers and some wings. Let's go watch a game. If you don't drink, let's go fishing. Let's go shooting. Let's go to the range. Let's do whatever. And then once you're there and it's just the two of you, or whatever, then you can ask that question and have the time and the space, and you're not waiting for your radio to go off to go get dispatched to a call, or something like that. So, and again, we have a pretty good bullshit meter, and we know when people are struggling. We know when people are having issues at home. We know when you're starting to come to work and your boots aren't polished and your uniform looks like crap and you haven't shaved. We had a no beard policy, so if you hadn't shaved and you had a little
Yep.
5 o'clock shadow at the time,
You're really rebelling against that now,
you
aren't you,
knew,
Steve?
okay, something. I am. I told myself I'm never going to shave again in my life. My wife doesn't like it, doesn't want it much longer, but we'll see if I can work on her. So I think if more people were willing to ask that question, I truly, truly, whether it's naive, whether it's hope, I feel that if everybody was in a position to just be able to ask that question, how are you doing?
Yeah.
I'd
Yeah.
have the answers. Just ask that question. how many lives could we save? How many marriages could we save? How many
Mm-hmm.
careers could we save? Because again, if you're not doing good at home, you're not doing good at work. You're going to get into, uses of force. You're going to get into complaints. You're going to start showing up late. You're going to show up with alcohol in your breath, stuff like that. And then again, how many careers, could we possibly
Yep.
save if we're just willing to ask the
No,
question? That's
absolutely.
it.
And I think
Just
as
got to
well,
ask.
it's sort of something that, being a copper, you probably would have been trained as well. Like when you get taught how to give like death notifications, like the language you use is very
Mm-hmm.
specific because you don't, you have to use that
Absolutely.
dead word. They've died. They've, been found deceased. Like you
Yes.
have to use that adequate language. And I spent a few years working on a suicide prevention and crisis counseling organization, like on like the hotline. And so many people are uncomfortable using the word suicide because it is still that sort of one subject in society that makes everyone fucking feel uncomfortable, like everyone. And because it scares
Yeah.
them.
And I think, not, yeah. And I think a lot of people
Plant the
think,
seed.
oh shit, if I say suicide and
Yeah.
I'm going to plant that seed. Maybe they trust me. From being there,
No.
you're not planting any seeds. The seed is already planted. You're not watering the seed. You're not plowing the field. So again, I think, like you said, the
Yeah.
verbiage is extremely important. And I've even gotten to the point where I don't
Yeah.
even use the words, "Are you thinking about hurting yourself?" Because if I put a gun in my mouth and pull the trigger, it's not going to hurt.
Yeah.
I'm going to die pretty quickly. So it's not going to hurt. So I even tell people, don't say hurt, say, are you thinking about ending your life? Are you thinking about killing yourself? Are you thinking about suicide? However you feel most comfortable, but ask that direct question, especially if you're having those discussions, those buddy checks, and you see the conversation going down that
Yeah.
line,
Well, and
ask
using
that
that
question.
word,
You're going to
like
have to.
sometimes like when we're talking about like like that passive suicidality, like sometimes they might not have even factored that into their thinking. And so then to kind of actually say, mate, are you thinking of taking your life? Are you suicidal? Like hearing that language back at that sort of person, I think is just, it's opening up that conversation because you're like, I want to hear the truth. I want an honest answer from you because I'm using this language because I care and I'm worried about you.
And you got to do it in person. You got to do it in person because we're very good at texting bullshit and laughy emojis and all that good stuff to say no, I'm good. I always use the term FaceTime and not Apple.
Yeah.
The actual FaceTime. Get in front of them, ask them again. Let's go get a beer.
Yeah.
Let's go get a soda. Let's go get a coffee. Let's go fishing. Let's go to the park. Let's whatever, and whatever their passion may be. If you don't hunt and they do, be like, I'm thinking about getting into hunting. Would you mind taking me out tomorrow and just sort of show me what you look for in the dirt for tracks or whatever it is? And then once you're out there and they're in their comfort zone,
Yeah,
it's a lot easier
very
to have
much
those
so.
conversations.
And so you were saying that with hashtag BuddyCheck, and so Steve and I just came across each other on social media, like just because we're in the sort of same first responder mental health realm,
Realm.
and I think you mentioned sort of that, you go around and you give talks about like officer wellness and all that kind of thing. And obviously the organization that you created is a 501c3. Is there a way for, like, do you have a website? Is there a way for people to be able to offer donations? Where does that money go towards? Like, tell me a little bit about that.
Yes. My website is #buddycheck.com. I'm on Facebook, hashtag, you actually got to spell it out, BuddyCheck.
Yep.
Same thing on Instagram, TikTok, even though I'm not very active on TikTok.
I
Technology
will put all
still
of this
sort
in
of
the show notes.
eludes me, so I need help. I have to sometimes have my kids help me with the social media stuff because I'm kind of old school.
You're on social media. That's pretty good.
When people, yeah. So when people make a donation, obviously, I'm not a paid person through my organization or anything like that. So it all goes to either travel expenses or anything like that to get to the next conference or, I have a couple items of swag that I will give away for small donations, like bracelets and um, poker chips and
Can people purchase
challenge
swag too?
coins.
Ooh, I
So
like that.
hashtag BuddyCheck. It's like
Yeah, I
those
was
Till
thinking
Valhalla
like one of
bracelets.
those
It's a metal
ones.
bracelet.
Um,
Yep. So yeah, so they can reach out to me through my website. They can send me an email. It's hashtag BuddyCheck at
and
gmail.com.
so if people were interested in
You
having
know,
you come
through
and
social media.
speak at their organization or their department or anything like that, like is there like do you sort of stay on the East Coast? Do you travel far and wide?
No, I travel far and wide, and again, wherever
Mm-hmm.
somebody will have me, it's where I'm going to show up. And it's again, I don't get paid for any of it. Everything
Yeah.
goes to travel expenses or lodging. Um, Normally, I try to, depending on how large of a conference or something like that, if they're willing to
Mm-hmm.
get my hotel
Yeah.
room fee
No,
or something for me, then that's great. But money is
yeah.
never going to be a reason I
Nice.
don't go.
I like that. And so
No.
you say you have swag. Like, can people purchase swag on your website too? Cool.
Yes. Yeah, they can contact me
Mm-hmm.
through my website, contact me through social media, and I can
Nice.
explain all
I'm
that
gonna
stuff
have
to
to
them
go
too.
check them out, Steve.
Yes, please do.
And I think we've almost probably covered everything. Do you have any presentations coming
Okay.
up that you want to promote or anything like that?
Yes, I will be going to Alabama in August for the North
It's gonna be
Alabama
hot.
Officer Wellness Conference.
Oof.
I know. Never been
We have
never been
family
to
there. It's
Alabama.
nice.
Um,
Yeah.
really? Ugh, okay. I will be in Nashville in October for the Tennessee Suicide
Amazing.
Prevention
Yep.
Network conference. I submitted a proposal for the CIT International Conference
Mm-hmm.
in August, but I
Okay.
haven't heard back yet
Where's that one
from
being
that
held?
one. And then, I don't
Okay.
remember. It's somewhere on the West Coast, so I'm not sure. But when I normally get selected, I normally post it on social media and
Yeah.
try to
Awesome.
get more people to come. And then obviously, I do CIT presentations for some of the
Mm-hmm.
counties locally about
Nice.
once a
All
month.
right. Well, thank you for everything that you've shared today. I really appreciate not only everything that you're doing, but your honesty in sharing your own struggles, and I think your incredible authenticity would just come through in the presentations you do because of your own struggles and the way that you're able to share that with everyone. So thank you for your honesty.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
No,
I
it's been
appreciate that.
awesome.
Thank you for having
I
me on.
normally finish these podcasts off by asking our guests 2 questions. And so obviously the name of the podcast is
Okay.
I Will Hold Space for Your Darkness. And, that relates to the darkness that we see and we experience as a result of, being first responders. So the first question that I like to ask is, what do you do to hold space for your darkness?
Capacity. You got to have the capacity and the tolerance, the space available, because again, even to this day, I'm still in therapy. I'm still sort of in that journey
Mm-hmm.
to wellness. I just think it's important to prioritize self care. I think it's important to prioritize what's important to you, whether that's family, whether that's
Mm-hmm.
whatever that may be for you. And my personal helper is my lab,
I was
my
going to
dog
say,
who's sitting on my
I
feet
think
as
I'd
we
heard
speak.
a couple of little wriggles in there.
Yes. She is not a
Oh, but
certified
aren't they
therapeutic
all?
dog or anything like that, service animal, but this one really is. Anywhere I go,
Yeah.
she's laying on my feet, and I just love her to death. So if I'm having a bad day, all I got to do
Yeah.
is go sit on the porch and pet her,
Yeah,
and
no,
life is okay
that's
after.
awesome, and don't feel bad. She wouldn't be the first pet to make an appearance on our podcast. So I was interviewing someone, and their cat like literally walked like in front of the camera. I was like, it was because cats give 0 fucks because they're assholes.
Yes. Oh, they do.
They really
They're
do.
nasty.
Um, no, thank you for that. I think it's super important, especially like we've been talking people who experience that intense empathy in the way that you clearly do, and I think that, you know, I do to a certain extent as well. And you were saying, you know, knowing your capacity, knowing when to put that boundary in place to go, you know what, I'm all done for today, and I'm going to switch my phone off, close my laptop. I'm not going to answer anyone, and they will, you know, they're going to have to figure it out themselves.
Yeah, and you know, the good thing is, you know, I'm sure if you forgot to turn your phone off and I was to call you and I just need somebody to vent to, and you're like, look, I don't have it today, but you can call blah, blah, blah. Again, it's that underground mental health network that, you know, the longer you do this, the more people you get to meet, you know, when you're traveling and going to speaking engagements, and you get that circle far and wide. You know, if you get a phone call from somebody in such state, and you're like, you know what, I have a buddy that I met 6 months ago, you know, let me give you his number. You know, if he doesn't answer, then please just call me back, and I'll either find somebody else or I'll just jump on that grenade with you. But, you know, it's important to and my therapist would
yes,
appreciate it. It's important to have boundaries, and it's important to stick 100%. To those boundaries.
I only learnt about boundaries in the last couple of years, and wow, wouldn't my life have been a little bit different had I known about them earlier. And hey, now you know that you have a resource a little bit further north up in Boston. Yes, anytime. I'll give you my number. Absolutely. And you can pass it on to anyone in need anytime.
Yeah.
And the second question that we ask is, and what can someone do, whether that's a friend, a spouse, anyone who, you know, is going to offer support you in holding space for that darkness?
I think just understanding that sometimes I need space. Sometimes I need your space to hold my darkness as well, whether you transfer that just for a little period of time or whether you transfer that in a conversation, trying to vent it so you're not holding it. I think it all comes down to just communication, relationships. If you're able to have those people in your support circle that you can rely on when your own capacity is now shut down, your window of tolerance is shut, you know, what do I do now? Well, I can call these people, or I can talk to my wife, or I can go outside with the dog. I can, you know, whatever works for you, whether it's go work out, whether it's, you know, do woodworking or you know, whatever your passion is or your hobbies, you definitely got to make sure you stay true to them.
So much sense. All right. Well, thank you again, Steve, for your time. I really appreciate it. Like I said, I will put all of #BuddyCheck's details, contact information, social media, names, all that sort of stuff. Put that in the show notes. So if anyone wants to get in touch with Steve, and alternatively give him a follow on all of the socials, because he posts, some great informative stuff, and it's, you know, I think it'd be helpful to anyone in our community. All right, cheers. All right, we will finish it up there. This has been another episode of I Will Hold Space for Your Darkness, a first responder mental health podcast. I've been your host, Erin Jane, and as always, let me listen in a way you've never been heard. Cheers.
Hi guys, it's Erin Jane here. Firstly, thank you for listening to I Will Hold Space for Your Darkness. This podcast really is for you, the listener, and I hope you're finding as much value in listening to these conversations as I am in having them. If you'd like to offer any feedback, suggest a subject matter, are interested in being a podcast guest, or would like to get in contact to receive first responder life and wellness coaching services, please reach out. You can find me on Instagram at Erin Jane Coaching, or the dedicated podcast account, ErinJane_Darkness Podcast, or my website, www.erinjanecoaching.com. I look forward to hearing from you, and I'm so grateful to have you as part of this darkness community. Cheers.